All right, hello and welcome. My name is Dr. Carrie Arnold, and I am the Program Director for Evidence-Based Coaching here at Fielding Graduate University. I want to welcome you to this webinar. It's a coaching and context webinar that we host monthly. And I'm very excited for the content that we're going to be receiving today. Before I get into the introduction on Chalmers, just a couple logistical things due to the size of our group. If you would please keep yourself on mute. And I highly recommend you use the chat feature and interact that way, using that for questions and comments. I will serve as moderator. We are expecting close to 100 people. I know some have registered who won't be able to attend, but given the size of the group, we may not be able to hit every question live. And the good news is you will not have to sit through a long PowerPoint deck today, as our presenter is going old school. And I, for one, am very excited about that. He has a marker and he has big pieces of white paper. And so this will be a very fun and interactive way to engage today on this topic. So just a couple logistical things. Again, please keep yourself on mute. This webinar is eligible for ICF continuing education units. It's resource development education. You do have to be present for the live session. And I will be sending you a survey link about 5 to 7 minutes before we close. You'll see that in chat. And my request is that you would just complete that very, very short evaluation. That, along with the attendance record on Zoom, is what will initiate your CCEU certificate, which you will receive in about 4 weeks from the Fielding Graduate University Registrar's Office. And I want to go ahead and now introduce Chalmers. And Chalmers, he doesn't know this, but I have been following and been a fan of his since the moment I decided to get trained as a coach. His work on language and speech acts, building on previous theorists of Searle and Austin and Flores, have really informed not just my work, but the coaching profession in general. And his text, which I have a couple of them right here. One of his first books is Language and the Pursuit of Happiness. It is very gently and not so gently used. And then he has a book called Leadership Effectiveness. Language and the Pursuit of Leadership Effectiveness. These textbooks have been adopted into many coach training programs. Many coaches reference his work. So Chalmers has been doing this work for over 32 years. He's actually an engineer by trade. He has an MBA, but he is a coach, he's a consultant, he's an educator, he has a TED Talk. He does work all over the world, and I'm very excited to have him here. He has been a great partner of Fielding and a big fan of the work we do here in the evidence-based coaching program. So without further ado, Chalmers, the floor is all yours.
Thank you for that wonderful, warm introduction. It's a real pleasure being with you today, and I look forward to our time together. A little background: I was introduced to the world of ontological coaching in 1987 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. My wife and I went to a workshop. I didn't even know what a workshop was at that point, and I was pretty sure I didn't need one, but it changed my life. It changed my life, and I ended up going to Newfield for the long program in 1995. And everybody, since January of 1996, this has been my world. Since January of 96, this is all I've been doing, and it's a real pleasure. And I happen to be one of the guys that went into the corporate route, right? So there's a lot of ways to take this material and to emphasize it and work with it. I went straight to leadership development, this work inside organizations, which was my passion. Now, for today, a brief conversation, right? I titled it Leadership Conversations and Results. So before we go any further, when we use the word results here, let's think very broadly. Productivity is a result, right? Organizational, right? Profitability is a result. But your organizational culture is a result, is it not? Right? Levels of trust and cohesion are results. Your public identity, how you show up in the world, is a result. The nature of your most important relationships, these are all results. So everybody, when we use the word results, please think quantitative and qualitative results. By show of hands, how many of us can see how leaders need to be aware of and ongoingly producing both quantitative and qualitative results with and through other people? Y'all, one of my favorite quotes of all time is attributed to Albert Einstein. He said, Not everything that counts can be counted. And not everything that can be counted really counts. So with this in mind, I've had the privilege of working with thousands of leaders over the past 30 years, and I get to ask a wonderful question. I get to ask this question. As a leader, what do you get paid to do? Now, before they answer it, I say, look, everybody here does 10,000 different things. I know that. The question is, of the 10,000 things you do as a leader, what would you say are the most important? 1 or 2 or 3? And everybody, I ask this question a lot. Many of you may as well in your work. And I get something like this. And if you work inside organizations, this may be very familiar to you. I get paid to set vision and enroll the team and the organization in the vision, to develop and implement strategy, to shape and cultivate organizational culture, to ensure profitability, right? To create and maintain alignment, not front-end alignment, organizational alignment, right? To execute well, to get results with and through people, right? To build mutually productive relationships. And folks, these are spot on. And we have a wonderful, rich conversation about of all the things we have to do well as leaders. Something like this almost always comes up. And now for me, I get to ask another question. I say, listen, pretend I have infiltrated your office and I'm sneaking around and I'm watching you do all the things you just said you get paid to do. I'm watching you shape the culture. I'm watching you drive profitability. I'm watching you ensure process improvement. I'm watching you groom the next generation of leaders, set the vision and enroll people in it. And so the question is, what do my eyeballs actually see you doing as a leader while you're doing that? What is the human being who is doing all these things actually doing? And with just a little reflection, we can see, I would see you as a leader engaging with other humans. I like to write it this way. And I write the word conversations. As a leader, you get paid to have effective conversations. You get paid to have conversations, the outcome of which is something and not something else. And everybody, this is so close we don't see it. This is so obvious we can miss it. Think about it. Leaders are conversational architects and conversational engines. Here's a question. Can you be a strong leader, strong now, without the ability to lift 100 pounds over your head? I hope so. It's a metaphor, right? Can you be a powerful leader, powerful from a wheelchair? Of course, and we have historical examples all over the place. Everybody, my wife is a physician. She's an OBGYN. One of our friends is a surgeon. He said, Chalmers, I got something going on in my right index knuckle that's been bothering me for a while. Of course, I've been ignoring it. Well, I went to the doctor last week and I found out this is the beginning of arthritis. Well, now I'm concerned. I'm 42 years old. Now I'm concerned. Everybody, why is he concerned? As a surgeon. Are you with me? The man is paid to cut. The man is paid to extract, right? Fine motor skills, huge physical dimension to that man's job. Now, folks, as leaders, I'm not suggesting that leaders have no physical dimension to their jobs. I do invite people, however, to look at the relative difference in importance between the physical and the conversational for people in positions of leadership. And so the way I help leaders shift from an understanding of conversations to help them look at language in a new way, given the centrality of conversations for leadership effectiveness that we just talked about. But deeper than this, given the centrality of conversations for process improvement, for accountability, for innovation, for customer service, for goodness sakes, I suggest it is worth spending some brain cells looking at language. And so our introductory question always is this. If you were to ask 100 people or 100,000 people, what is language? What is language for? Everyone, what will the gigantic majority answer with? It's going to be a tool for communication or some variation of that response. Everyone, That's such a widely held way of looking at language. My experience is most people do not hold that as a way of looking at language. They hold it as a definition of language. They hold it as a fact about language. And I was taught this, and now I share this. If language is a tool, it's a tool you cannot put down. This one's different. It's qualitatively different. This tool apparently is the one tool we need for every single other tool we'll ever pick up. And so the interpretation that's at the heart of what I got taught, right? It's at the heart of my work, the interpretation I invite leaders and teams all over to consider and to explore with me is language creates and generates. It does not simply describe. It does, and let's get some real life examples here before we go one step further. If I was to say, Carrie, will you have lunch with me next Tuesday at 1 o'clock? If she says yes, we have just now invented a next Tuesday at 1 o'clock that 5 seconds ago it's not going to happen. We're not describing anything. We're making something happen. Everyone think of this. Think of every single time in your life you ever said the word yes. So every single time in your life, the word yes ever popped out of your mouth. Well, here's the obvious question. If all those times instead you had said no, would your life be different? Yes. You'd be on this call, right? Gigantic aspects of all of our lives would be tremendously different. One of my favorite examples of this, right? How language creates is a baseball story. After a big game, 2 umpires are sitting around talking. And the first umpire says, look, Joe is a fabulous umpire. There's balls and there's strikes. He calls them like they are. Second umpire said, no, there's balls and there's strikes. He calls them like he sees them. At this point, Joe walks up and said, y'all both wrong. He said, there's balls and there's strikes, but they ain't nothing till I call them. When he says strike 3, in that context, you are out. So what are 2 more examples, everybody? This question is for everybody on this call right now who is either married or has ever been married. So it's a simple question. Is it different being married than not being married? It's not a trick question. Yes, it's different. It's different legally. It's different socially. It's different sexually for most of us. It's different financially. It's different. So the question we have to ask, how did we go from being not married to being married? How'd that happen? Well, with a little reflection, somebody said something. Yes, or I do, whatever the ceremony calls for. And in that moment, it's not trivially different. It's not marginally different. No, it's really different. Everyone, we speak ourselves into the world. In a very interesting way, we speak ourselves into the world. Now, I'm not suggesting that we don't describe with language. Of course we describe with language. What I'm saying is that is not all that we do. And for leaders and those of us who get paid to have effective conversations, I suggest learning something about this, not all that we do dimension of language can be very helpful. Because I mean this, everybody on this call, including me, we are already, are we not, producing big chunks of non-physical but very real results out of how we wield this tool. Already. Organizations are declared into being, are they not? The United States was declared into being, was it not? Was there work to do after that declaration? Yes, but without that declaration, we have no country. Everybody on this call, I suggest, knew this before this thing started, intuitively, that there's something going on with language. There's something going on that has a creative dimension to it. Now, maybe not exactly the way I'm emphasizing it or pointing to it, but I want to be explicit here where we are normally implicit or often implicit, right? I want to start to look at language instead of simply swimming in it. Y'all, one of the most powerful prerequisite steps, right, for learning, no matter what the subject matter, this is a step that has nothing to do with our legs. It's a language step. And I suggest everybody here knows this. A powerful prerequisite for learning is when the learner thinks internally or says externally 3 little words. And they are I don't know. And when we think or say, I don't know, we're not describing a state of affairs nearly as much as we are producing something. What we're producing is called a context or an opening for learning. Not physical, utterly real. Not physical, utterly and completely real. And I believe this, everybody on this call knows this firsthand because, by show of hands, how many of us here today have ever tried to teach somebody something when the learner thought they already knew it? How much learning takes place in those situations on average? Zero. On average, it's zero. So everybody inside organizations, y'all, there's a great author, Jim Collins out there, right? He wrote Good to Great, Built to Last, powerful leadership books, right? He's characterized a level 5 leader. This is somebody who sustains excellence inside organizations through turmoil, through many generations, level 5 leader. And for him, it's characterized by strong commitment and ambition to the common good and humility. Not or, and, right? This combination of a strong commitment and ambition to the common good, coupled with a willingness to learn, an acknowledgement that he doesn't already know everything. Y'all, in this case, I am an engineer by trade. I like processes. When we think or say, I don't know, we're really thinking or saying, I know that I don't know, right? I know that I don't know, we call ignorance. Blindness is, I don't know that I don't know. So a powerful formula for learning is we got to get from blindness to ignorance. And we speak it so just like the umpire. Just like we declare beginnerhood into being. It's a powerful example of the power of language. Now on this umbrella, or under this umbrella, right, that we have a generative side to language, there's some basic claims that I always include in my work. The first basic claim is that we all live in language. This claim that we live in language was first taught to me, first ever, in this body of ontological coaching, right? Until I was immersed in this work, I never thought this way. I never looked at it this way. But this notion, we live in language, is a rather awkward expression. Most of us never think it, nor do we say it. So what do we mean by this? Once again, show of hands. Who on the call here today has the little voice inside? The one that's saying, what's he talking about? That's what I'm talking about. That's the one. Next question. Who has a debate team? Y'all, one of my favorite quotes of all time, some of y'all may know this quote, is attributed to Mark Twain. He allegedly said, I'm always in conversation, and sometimes other people are involved. So it's not just Mark Twain or schizophrenics, folks, it's us without exception, no exceptions. And because we live in language, right? No exceptions all the time. This is what we do. You here with me and everyone you have ever known and ever will know, and me too, we are continually confronted with events. Events at home, events at work, events at school, events with our family, events with our friends, events on the turnpike, events on vacation. And what we do as human beings, we make up stories about these events. We hold these stories to be the truth, and we forget that we made them up. And everyone, when we use the word story in this context, it's not a fib or fabrication, right? It's not a purposeful manipulation, and it certainly is not a self-deception. It is an interpretation, an explanation. Everybody, one of the most powerful distinctions I was ever taught, and one that I believe is required for those of us seeking to deepen our level of self-awareness in this domain, a powerful distinction is this: event is not equal to explanation. Event is not equal explanation. And for those of us seeking to deepen our level of self-awareness, I want to offer this as a required, not an optional distinction to possess. If you don't like the word explanation, use the word interpretation. If you don't like the word interpretation, use the word narrative or story over here. So everybody, one quick example. Pretend you have a middle school or a high school child. Your middle school or high school child comes home from school one day, walks through the front door and walks right up to you and looks you in the eye, and the first thing out of his mouth is, "I'm stupid." "What are you talking about, son?" "I'm stupid." "What are you talking about?" I got an F on my final exam. So everybody, in this little example, what's the event? The F on the test, is it not? The F on the test. Next question, what's the explanation? What's his interpretation? "I'm stupid." Question everybody, if that child lives in that conversation long enough, is that a descriptive thing or a creative thing? It's a creative thing. And everybody, please forget the F story. And right now, think much more broadly with me. Here's a question. Is it the events of your life or your explanations about those events that are more influential as to the actual actions you end up taking in the world? Which is it? The explanation. And out of the actual action you take in the real world, you end up producing something called quantitative and qualitative results, do we not? A wide variety of quantitative and qualitative results. And everybody, your explanations are always the springboard for your actions. It's never the event. It is never the event. It is always the explanations. Everybody, I'm going to share with you what happened to me the first time I was because I'm a practitioner. The first time I was introduced to events and explanations this way, I'm going to share with you where my mind went. Okay, I get it. If you put it like that, I guess I'm doing it. If you put it that way, I guess I'm doing it. I guess I am making up explanations out of the events that occur in my life. The actions I take are based on those explanations, yes. And the results I ultimately produce, those are a function of the actions I took or did not take. I get that. I'm doing that. But you know something? Explanations are either right or wrong, and mine are almost always right. I want to invite everybody here not to do that. Meaning I want to invite everybody here not to quickly, knee-jerk, automatically throw the right-wrong grid, the right-wrong scaffolding on top of your and other people's explanations. How about we substitute something called effective or ineffective, powerful or unpowerful, as it relates to your and other people's explanations? This is what I was invited to do back in 1995, and it's what I invite people to do now. Because if we did that, the questions would start to sound like this. You know, I hear you, but let's talk about this. Is that explanation, is it effective or ineffective, given what you've already said you want to be, do, or have in this organization, in this relationship? Is it powerful or unpowerful, given the goals you've already set for yourself in area A, area B, area C? Does it serve you or not serve you, given the ground you've already said you want to cover? Everyone, as it relates to explanations, never ever in a vacuum. Always in some context, your context of, given the results we say we want. But everybody, here's the kicker. If you don't see yourself as doing this to begin with, right? If you don't see, if your self-awareness is not turned on enough, that you can see that you're already doing this, already making up explanations and taking action, and then you couple that with you not producing some important result that you say you want, everybody, in those instances, the option for you of offering a more powerful interpretation, it will never occur to you. It will never, because it's going to be off your radar screen. Meaning, If you don't see yourself as doing this now, there's nothing to update. And what you will have effectively and inadvertently done is take off the table even the option of looking at how you look at things. Are you with me? You will have removed from the field of play a potentially gigantically important variable and not even known that you've done that. Folks, it's this level of self-awareness, right, that we call second order learning, right? This capacity to take a look at how we look at things, not just to take new actions, but to take a look at how we look at things on purpose, to bring ourselves into the equation. It's a powerful type of learning. In my work, I often have a little stick man with a big eyeball in the sky looking down at him, and this is called the big eye, right? It's meant to symbolize self-awareness, you taking a look at you, me taking a look at me. The ability to see this about ourselves is a necessary starting point for even the option of authoring more powerful interpretations in our lives. Now, another basic claim of looking at language this way, particularly relevant for leadership, is that language creates and generates something called context. Language creates and generates context, not physical, utterly real. Utterly and completely real. How many of y'all have a sense, again, by show of hands, that for your most difficult, perhaps, or most challenging conversations, your ability to be successful in that conversation almost always has to do with your ability to create powerful context rather than deliver impeccable content? You know, this distinction makes sense, right? And y'all, I believe this. We have a good BS detector. We have a good authenticity detector. There is a type of context that was taught to me. Y'all, I've had the privilege of being a speaker in a network of CEO peer groups around the world. The organization that's called Vistage, Vistage. And for those of you that may be in medium-sized businesses interested in a powerful set of peer groups, these groups meet monthly, and I'm privileged to be on the speaking circuit around the country with these guys. In my learning with them, I actually chaired a group here in Naples, Florida for a few years back in the early 2000s. I was introduced to a term that has stuck with me, one of the most excellent ways of understanding powerful context I've come across. And here's the word I was taught. Can y'all read this? The word is carefrontation. The word is carefrontation, not confrontation, carefrontation. So obviously it's a made up word, but if we went to Webster's dictionary and by some miracle found the word carefrontation defined, how many of y'all have a sense that you could intuitively pretty much come up with it, right? I care enough about you to initiate a conversation that in this moment, I'm not 100% sure how it's going to go. You know, I know that you wanted this to happen in your career and that to happen in your career. And right now, I care enough about you to enter into this conversation because I think the status quo, if left unattended, it's not going to take you there. Everyone, there is a conversational competency here to create this kind of space. And if you're taking notes, I invite you to write this phrase down. Speak into my concerns. That's the expression I'd like you to write down if you're taking notes. Speak into my concerns. So think of this. Imagine you have a difficult, a challenging conversation that you have been maybe avoiding, but it's on your calendar for tomorrow morning. How many of you would say that if you have avoided a conversation, you did so for a reason? Most of us would say, yeah, I did so for a reason. And then next question, if somebody asked you what that reason was, you could likely tell them, yes. Everyone, if your self-awareness is turned on enough that you can articulate for yourself what that reason is, that reason lives as an internal narrative, does it not? That's where it lives. It lives as an internal conversation. That's what you speak out loud up front. I have a concern, Carrie, that something I want to talk to you about may not go well. I have a concern that you may overreact to some feedback I need to give you. Have a concern that where you say you want to go in your career and in this situation, I have a concern that you're not going there, right? That if the status quo doesn't change what I know you want for yourself, it's not going to happen. And to be honest, I'm just struggling with the best way to bring this to your attention. And at the same time, have you not think I don't value all these other parts of your job, which I do. Everybody, I invite you, we have a good BS detector. Brene Brown talks about vulnerability, right? We can talk about vulnerability. We can talk about authenticity. We can talk about getting real. However you want to say it, it's the same thing. Here is a way I invite people to approach difficult conversations at work and at home. However else you approach it, you prepare for a difficult conversation, I invite you to think about this and add it to your toolkit. Number one, can we start here with this claim? There are no guarantees in any conversation. No matter what you do, no matter how you prepare, there's no ironclad guarantees. Okay, got it. Step number one, no guarantees in any conversation. Check. Number two, given that there's no guarantees, what can I do, therefore, in tomorrow's interaction such that no matter what the ultimate outcome turns out to be, I will have the fewest regrets? Okay, number one, no guarantees, no matter what you do, got it, check. Number two, okay, what can I do in tomorrow's conversation that I've been avoiding such that 10 minutes after it's over or 10 years after it's over, I can look in the mirror and feel pretty good? How many of you would say if you did that, you would bring a version of your best self to the table? Y'all, the older I get, I turned 62 this year, the older I get, the more clear this is. Number one, authenticity has never let me down. And number two, our ability to be successful in difficult, challenging conversations almost always has a much more to do with our ability to create powerful context than anything we do with delivering the content. In fact, everybody, I believe this: if you set the context well enough, you can flub up a little bit on the content, right? And still achieve shared understanding and still achieve the outcome that you're seeking to produce. One more point about context. I believe this, that for many difficult conversations, when we think about what are the outcomes I really want to achieve in this conversation I've been avoiding. Now, this doesn't hold up 100% of the time, but I believe it holds up a lot. How many of us would say, when we really think about what are the outcomes we want in these kind of conversations, many times there is a qualitative dimension and a quantitative dimension to the outcomes. The qualitative dimension is, I want to shift in understanding on how you think, right? I want to shift in receptivity. I want you to begin to quote unquote see something a little differently, right? So I can't observe this, but it's one of the results I'm looking for. Another result I want is quantitative. That's a change in your observable behavior. And so given that many of these kinds of conversations, right, we have a qualitative desired result and a quantitative desired result. For me, the purposeful creation of conversational context is even more important. It's even more important. So everybody, as we think about this, right, this capacity to speak creatively, to get things done, the purposeful creation of conversational context, I want to expand and briefly talk about the language acts that are involved, and specifically those inside organizations. Many of you that have done this sort of work, these won't be new, right? Everything we think or say, we're constantly doing a dance using one or more of these foundational language acts or speech acts: declarations, assessments, assertions, requests, offers, and promises. So as we think about leadership and how these language acts play out inside organizations, immediately we can see this. This is a drawing, and my claim is every single organization can be represented the exact same way, no matter how big or small, simple or complex, under the shared roof of desired results, which is your organizational vision, right? Your goals, objectives, desired future state, right? Organizational go-to is up here. On the foundation of your identity, who you say you are. This is where your mission statement lives, right? Your purpose. your standards, your values, your operating principles, right? Your organizational come from. Again, in the middle are human beings, people, coordinating action, doing things together, hopefully to achieve these results. So everybody, as we talk about leaders as conversational architects and conversational engines, there are types of conversations designed to bring forth different types of quantitative and qualitative results. Let's first talk about alignment. We're going to call these conversations for alignment, or we can call them, we can say it's conversations for culture, and we can say conversations for orientation. But everybody, these foundational leadership conversations are always focused on the roof and the foundation, not the middle, and they're always designed to produce a qualitative result called shared understanding. Shared understanding is the point of these conversations. Now, shared understanding of what? Well, shared understanding of your organizational come from and your organizational go to. Who are we? What do we stand for? Where are we going? Why are we going there? How are we going to treat each other along the way? So everybody, the question is, how far down into an organization are people able to answer these questions? Right? Shared understanding is the desired result, and the metric is, how far down does it go? Now, there are three foundational conversational processes that leaders are responsible for in this way of looking at things. Number one, and here's where the first language act is coming to bear. Number one, somebody with authority has to make these foundational declarations to begin with. Are you with me? The roof is declared into being. Are we clear about that? Organizational visions are declared into being. Goals are declared into being. Objectives declared into being. Look at the bottom. Organizational values are declared into being, right? Your purpose, your standards, by people with authority to do so. Once these declarations have been made, so that's conversation number one. Then you have two more conversational processes required. You have something called onboarding, and you have something called, number three is ongoing. Right? Onboarding is bringing new people into the organization, and y'all be with me. When new people, look, here's a clue. It will be impossible for you or anybody inside an organization to establish and maintain a coherent onboarding or ongoing process inside that company if the roof and the foundation declarations have not been already established. You with me? Because if you haven't established the roof and the foundation, you got nothing to anchor these two. You got nothing to anchor these with when people come on board. So what I tell people in workshops, that whenever you see the words, again, it's not the only way, but whenever you see the words alignment or culture or orientation, that the number three magically pop into your head. For this reason, as a conversational architect, the collective leadership of any organization is collectively responsible for these three foundational conversational processes. First is the initial establishment of the roof and the foundation. Second, onboarding to bring people into the organization. And third, ongoing for continual reinforcement, refreshment of that as we move forward. Y'all, if you're interested more in this, in addition to my book, there's a neat book out there. The guy's name is Patrick Lencioni, and the book is called The Advantage. And to me, it's a really readable, very accessible book that offers, again, for me, a very helpful perspective if you want to take another look at your version of the roof and your version of the foundation. All right, so declarations, right? One or two key points about declarations. When you make a declaration, there is a social commitment that comes along with it, and that is you will act consistently with it. Does that make sense? Here's one thing I say to folks in organizations. If you, on a senior leadership team, in your organization, make publicly these declarations that are the goals and objectives, make public declarations of your values and your standards, you do not then need to come behind it and say, and now I want all of you non-leaders to watch all of us leaders closely to see if we are acting consistently with this. Why don't you need to add that last part? Because they're watching you anyway. They're watching. And now we can see how language creates something called public identity. What do we call someone who says, these are our most important values? These are the standards we hold dear. This is the direction we're going. That's what they say. And then they take actions look like it's over here. What do we call such a person? A hypocrite. And folks, you get to be a hypocrite whether you're aware this is happening to you or not, whether you want this to happen. You don't get to say it's a byproduct of living life as a non-hermit, right? Living life with and through other people. Another language act. Everybody, this is crucial to observe. When we turn our attention away from the roof and the foundation, but to the middle of the house, different language acts show up immediately. When we look at the middle of the house, we don't see primarily declarations anymore. The middle of the house is promises. The middle of the house is commitments. I use these words interchangeably. The middle of the house is agreements. So everyone, no matter how else you look at what an organization is at its core, I have found that this perspective, this lens is very beneficial. When you look deeply at any organization, it can be determined that this company is right now human beings coordinating action, doing things together, but they're not coordinating action with magic. They're coordinating action with specific types of conversations, which are promises, commitments, and agreements. Now, the front end of a promise, commitment, agreement is a request, is it not? Or an offer, right? So now we get to look at the ways that we coordinate action. Some of them are excellent for collaborative execution and a culture of healthy accountability. Other ways are not excellent at all. So as we look at this, right? What are the elements of an effective request? Actually, it's an effective request or an effective offer, right? Either one. Right? And so now we have something called a committed speaker, right? Are you committed? Are you fully present in the conversation? A committed listener. A committed listener is not texting someone else in this moment, right? A committed listener is someone who has eye contact typically, right? That's engaged with you, not watching TV perhaps, right? Not doing something else. In this way of thinking, you don't get to call yourself a committed speaker unless you take the actions required to elicit a committed listener. That's what a committed speaker is. Someone who does whatever it takes to get a committed listener in front of you. And everybody, if your request is important to you, job number one, get a committed listener in front of you or postpone this conversation. Next, future act, element number 3, future action and conditions of satisfaction, right? What do you want me to do? Future action and conditions of satisfaction. Some criteria that if you saw that on the back end would allow you to say, I'm satisfied, right? Another aspect, obviously, of an effective request is the time frame. When do you want it? Now, everyone, there's an important distinction here when we look at these elements of an effective request. What I'm doing now, I am lumping together elements 3 and 4. I'm lumping together elements 3 and 4 because these two are dramatically impacted by something we call the background of obviousness. The background of obviousness. So it's a technical term. Everybody, are we comfortable with this? Is it possible that what's obvious to you may not be obvious to your listener? Right? Is it also possible, who is not a clone of you, by the way, but is a unique observer, like we all do? How about this? Is it possible that you might not need an overt, explicit time frame in your request, and you and your listener will achieve shared understanding of time? Is that possible? It's possible, sure. Is it also possible you will not? Absolutely. You know, it's like this, Carrie, from a time frame standpoint, I like that as soon as possible. You know, August is good. Next August, I'm excellent. You know, if you want something 2 o'clock Pacific time Tuesday, why not request it 2 o'clock Pacific time Tuesday? You know, my request, I'd like you to be more supportive of Carrie, please. Be more supportive. You know, I kind of don't know what that means. Because what support looks like to you is meddling or micromanagement to her. What do you want me to start doing, stop doing, design, develop, procure? What do you want me to do? Everybody, last two, context and mood. I tell people this, context is last on this list, but first out of your mouth. Last on the list, here, but first out of your mouth. What are you going to say right up front to speak into your concerns, perhaps, to declare your intention, to give the big picture? Folks, there's a pretty good TED Talk out there. The guy's name is Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K, and he talks about the power of why. How many of us, when we're on the receiving end of a request, like to know why? I like to know why. It helps me. This is where you give that to your listener. And obviously the mood of the request, right? The right conversation in the wrong mood is the wrong conversation. Right? We don't all need to be psychologists here to be effective, but being emotionally illiterate is not the answer either. Right? So y'all, elements of an effective request. However, all of this is happening, right? All in the network of interdependency. Inside an organization, you've got all these different commitment cycles happening at the same time, dependent on each other. Can something in one department impact another department? Happens all the time. Why? Because those departments are connected. They're not physically connected. It's another metaphor, right? But they're connected via the network of interdependent commitments that the company itself is. So the front end, right? All we did here is we shined a light and brought some shared distinctions, new tools, a shared vocabulary to the front end of making a workplace commitment. But the front end is not sufficient by itself. How do you respond to requests? And how do you allow people to respond as a leader? Well, there are 4 and only 4 valid responses if your desired results are a sustainable culture of healthy accountability and excellent collaborative execution. You got 4 choices. And they are yes, no, pretty straightforward. Commit to commit. You know, Carrie, understand your request. I cannot even answer you right now. I need my other calendar. I think I have something that week. I tell you what, I'm gonna go check. I'll get back to you. I have a yes or no by 5 p.m. today. Not I'll get back to you later. No, 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 no. A yes or a no by 5 p.m. today. And last option, Carrie, understand your request. You want 2 locations up and running by July 1st. I can't do 2. I can do 1 or 2 by August 1st. Counter offer. Can either of those get us to a yes here today? So everybody, what responses are conspicuously absent from our list? Maybe doesn't make the list. I'll try. What does Yoda say about try? There is no try. There is do or do not. A blank stare doesn't make the list. Right? Everyone, build this house, which is your organization, in such a way that you allow a whole bunch of requests to have in them unclear or nebulous conditions of satisfaction, unspoken or assumed timeframes, loose or non-existent context, uncommitted listeners, and responses like, I'll try, let me get back to you on that, I'll do my best. And everybody, once you start seeing this played across all the human interactions inside a company, all of the results are bad. Everyone, this is crucial. This is where the rubber hits the road for organizational execution. I can go down no further than this. You can do this well, or you can do this poorly, but you can't not do it. And I tell folks, already, if you're in an organization that has more than one person in it, you're already doing a version of this now. You can't not. This is the blocking and tackling, the nuts and bolts of organizational execution, coordination of action. When I was a kid, everybody, there was a company on TV that made oil filters. The company was called Fram. I remember the company because the commercials would all end the exact same way. A crusty mechanic looks at the camera after he just worked on a car motor that had blown because the foolish customer had not been using fram oil filters. And he says, you can pay me now, or you can pay me later. How many of y'all have a sense that this is paying me now, metaphorically speaking, as you're trying to improve how people operate together inside an organization? Paying me later is sloppiness here, leading to a whole bunch of uncertainty, unclarity thrown into this network of interdependency, making healthy accountability very difficult and productivity and performance very difficult. Everyone, this is a crucial distinction to make. Most of us, if we work in organizations at all, have an understanding of this causal relationship. An organization's culture influences how people in that organization work together. So most of us would say, yes, I buy that causal relationship. An organization's culture influences the way inside that company work together. Here's another one. By improving how people inside the company work together, you can shape the culture. Because language creates. By doing something tangible, giving people a shared set of tools and doing it over time, you can shape something intangible, especially if that intangible result is your version of a culture of healthy accountability, because these are proven to help you move in that direction.
So Chalmers,
yep.
Sorry to interrupt, but there are three really good questions, and I wanted to just name all three of them and see which ones you're able to answer in the short time we have left. So I'm going to start with one by Lisa, and I'll name all three and then you can react. So the first question is, how do you encourage buy-in or support for actions relating to diversity, equity, and inclusion beyond ROI, return on investment? So that's the first question, because those are hard conversations to be in right now. The second question from Kimberly is, when you're introducing this framework to leaders, what are some of the actions you ask the leaders to adopt? And then the last question, hopefully I'm not stacking those, we're not supposed to do that as coaches, but I want to get all three of them named. Can you say a little bit more about what it means to create context for a conversation?
Excellent. The first thing that we didn't cover here today that is central to my work is this basic claim that we are each unique observers, right? That nobody has privileged access to the truth, right? There's nothing in the human body that has us have objectivity. One of my teachers said, look, we don't have objectivity. We have objectivity in parentheses, right? We have objectivity in parentheses. So as a basic, rock solid, foundational claim, in my work inside organizations, we talk about this. We are unique. We are each unique observers. And the observer that we are is a walking, talking bundle of coherency among three separate but obviously interdependent domains: our language, internal and external conversations, our moods and emotions, and our physical bodies and our biology. And all the things that make us unique, we are each a unique individual, no exceptions ever. I help people, let's dispel the grand illusion that everyone sees things like I do. They do not and they cannot. And the problem with the grand illusion, if you walk around with the grand illusion in place, that everyone sees things like you do, what is right under the surface for you waiting to pop out is a dramatically increased tendency to ascribe ill intentions. Look, Carrie, you were at the meeting. I was at the meeting. You have eyes. I know you saw what happened in there. And now after the meeting, we find ourselves at cross purposes. So I'm like, okay, number one, Carrie saw what I saw. Number two, we're now at cross purposes. Therefore, number three, she must have bad intentions. What else could it be? When in reality, you didn't see what I saw to begin with. And so, Carrie, on the diversity and inclusion, for me, it is this notion that we establish right up front. We are unique observers. Everybody, by definition, is interpreting. We're interpreting linguistically, we're interpreting moods and emotions, and we're interpreting biologically. and everybody is doing it without exception. That's the starting point. This also can bring us to the power of peer groups. How valuable would a peer group be if you walk in the door and the first thing you see is everybody around the table looks and thinks and talks and walks just like you? I don't need another me. I got a me. I need other people, right? I need other people in the group. And so for me, the unique observer, Carrie, has been central to anything I've ever done around inclusion, around diversity, is as a starting point, we are simply that. We are unique observers. We do not have objectivity. Y'all, I mean this, before I was introduced to this work, I used to think, unless I was obviously manic on the ceiling, or at least unless I was obviously in a puddle of depression on the floor, that's basically objective. And we're not. And we're not. The next question, about new actions for leaders. I like to invite leaders to be conscious about their responsibility in these three conversational processes. Number one, have you established to your satisfaction your version of the organizational go-to and your version of the organizational come from at a level of detail that you're comfortable with, and how far down into the organization, right, have you achieved shared understanding? Because there is no such thing as shared commitment to this without shared understanding coming first. Shared understanding is a prerequisite for shared commitment. These conversations, y'all, these conversations are contextual conversations. They're not transactional. The transactions take place in the middle, right? These are, y'all, just like carefrontation is a conversational context. How many of y'all are comfortable with this? The roof and the foundation are your organizational context. It's the background in which the content takes place, and it's declared into being. So if leaders are comfortable with the notion that we are conversational architects and conversational engines, the next step is, let's be purposeful about conversation. This is conversational design. Let's invent on purpose conversations for alignment, conversations for culture, conversations for orientation, and begin having them. Again, if you view yourself as a conversational architect and a conversational engine, then we get to be purposeful about the types of conversations we produce and the results that those conversations yield. And finally, the last thing you said, Carrie, about context, I have found that this capacity to speak authentically, right? This notion of carefrontation. I had a real life example. I worked for Andersen Consulting out of grad school, turned into Accenture. I was 1 year in, and my boss was in for 5 years, but he was my good friend, right? My good friend, who was the same age as me, joined Andersen 4 years ahead of me, and I spent my first year on his project. He gave me a lesson, y'all, I have not ever let go of. Here's what he said to me. I thought at that point, my 1 year anniversary, I was doing pretty well. I did not think I was an A+ player, but I knew I was an A player. He comes up and says, Chalmers, I need to have a conversation with you. I'm not 100% sure how to have it. I have a concern you may overreact to some feedback I'm going to give you. I have a concern that you say you want a long career here. Well, I have a concern that right now, if nothing changes on your part, it's not going to happen for you. I'm at the manager's meetings. You're not at those meetings, right? I don't know the best way to have this conversation, but what I know is you and I right now, we have to have this conversation. You know, he said that to me, I was 26 years old. And the way he said it, I was aware enough, I knew how hard it was for him, right, to have that conversation with me, because we were friends, we drank beer together, we played golf, right, all that. And my respect for him went through the roof. And he said, Chalmers, you and I will always be friends, but you need to know that the way you're working right now, it's not going to bring you where I think you say you want to go. And it was my first introduction to carefrontation, right? And y'all, I mean this, it's not either or. It's not candor or diplomacy, it's both. It's not support and challenge, it's both. Are you with me?
Yes, thank you, Chalmers. I appreciate it. And I know we're a couple minutes past the hour. I did put the survey link in for those who do need to go. Please, thank you for your time. And feel free to stay a little bit longer if you'd like to hear a couple more questions get answered. But for those who can't stay, thank you so much. I'll go ahead and stop the recording.